and welcome to our class tonight. This is the Glenn J. Kimber Academy in Lehi, Utah. And I'm Teresa Young, your host for tonight's class with our financial expert, Chris Miles. Our class is Cash Flow Freedom. And I want to tell you a little bit about Chris. Let me get my old lady glasses on, sorry. Chris Miles, the cash flow expert, is a leading authority on how to quickly create cash flow and lasting wealth for thousands of his clients, entrepreneurs, and others internationally. He's been featured in U.S. News, CNN Money, YFS Magazine, and has spoken to thousands internationally, getting them fast financial results. In fact, his average client finds an average of $34,000 per year. Chris consistently teaches audiences how to do what no other financial advisors can or will: achieve financial prosperity now and in the future, while spending time doing what they love most. And so we're happy to welcome Chris Miles, and we're going to turn the time over to him.
All right, thanks, Teresa. Well, glad to have each of you here. I usually don't like to use a podium too often, so I might touch it occasionally for you. So for those of you, if you're excited for tonight, just go ahead and hit the space bar several times. That'd be great. So anyways, I want to talk about cash flow to freedom. What is it and how do we get more of it? I mean, many of you probably notice in your lives that you want more cash flow, I would hope. You know, I noticed in my life that the times when I've been most liberated and most free, when there's more cash flow. When there's the lack of it, it tends to be worse. And so that's what we really want to go over today is what is that exactly? Because I'll tell you, I started out actually way back when. I actually majored in sociology, and I'll tell you, I love the fact that Kimber Academy is here doing this. I've actually known Dr. Kimber for several years, and was not fortunate enough to even know who Dr. Skousen was, but I definitely wanted to get to know him better when he was alive. But I'll tell you, it's such an amazing opportunity to be here today with them, and I definitely want to thank each of you for being able to invite me here. So in any case, when I started out, I actually started out majoring in sociology, went to college, did that, but I wanted to go into business consulting. And I realized if I wanted to do that, I should probably have a business if I were going to teach other people how to do things in their own business. So I thought, I said, what am I going to do to actually have a good business? Something that would work, give me that real life experience. And the opportunity came up for me to become a financial advisor. And so I applied, got in the program, loved it, and I ended up becoming that traditional financial advisor you've probably seen time and time again. And I have to tell you, I mean, financial advising is interesting. As much as I care for people, it's really interesting trying to teach those kind of concepts to people when you're broke. It's really hard to. You hear a saying out there that they're called brokers because they're broker than you and I are, and that's very true. I have to tell you, it's been so much fun seeing how over the years that you see those people, you're told to do one thing, but it doesn't work over time. And I learned that after about 4 years of being a financial advisor, I realized, holy cow, this isn't really working. And so I thought, well, should I stay with it? Should I not? What's going to work? And it was actually through a mutual acquaintance how I got to know Dr. Kimber. In fact, he actually told me, he says, you know what you do really stinks. Like, it does not work. And so we got this little battle of going back and forth. What's better? Is it, should we be doing stuff in like mutual funds, or should we be doing real estate, or whatever it might be? And eventually I got to the point where my friend, his name was Doug, he just said, listen, Chris, let's stop right here. Tell me, what principles do you teach your clients? And I thought for a minute, well, what are principles? He says, well, there's problem number one. He's like, second, how many of your clients are actually financially free? Or they actually really feel like they're liberated? And I thought for a minute, and I said, probably none. Not even the retired ones that I had, the ones that were like retired physicians. None of them seemed to be really financially free either. He said, well, good job, Chris. That's awesome. Then he asked me, he said, well, if they didn't do it, how about you guys? How about you as financial advisors and planners? All of the people you know in that industry, how many of you are actually financially free? Not from the commissions you earn as being a financial advisor, but actually from using the same products and techniques that you've been teaching everybody else to do. And as I thought for a moment, I thought, none, maybe one. And I found out when he lost his job, that one wasn't either. And so it became pretty apparent that something was wrong. And so he finally just said, all right, well, there's your problem. And I said, well, tell me the answer. What is your solution? And Doug just told me, he said, well, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, you better dang well tell me, or I'm going to kick you in the shins. So give me something. And so he said, all right, if you're really, really serious about this, there's this radio show that's on at 9 o'clock in the morning that'll start. This is back in December of 2005 when we had this conversation. He's like, listen to this show at 9 o'clock in the morning. He's like, and then go get this Robert Kiyosaki book, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. He says, go get the book called Who Took My Money, which basically just ripped apart financial advising, mutual funds, and all that good stuff. But I'll tell you, I'm so grateful for that conversation, because it was a few months later that I went to an event that some of our friends put on. I realized I can't teach this anymore and stay in integrity. Like, this stuff does not work. It hasn't worked for several decades, nor will it work for the future as well. And that's exactly what I want to show you, is that when I changed the way I thought about money, when I changed the way I saw it, everything changed in my own world. In fact, I retired in March of 2006 as being a financial planner, said I'll never teach about money again. I know, I went back on that. And then by that June or July, I actually was able to retire. And the great thing is, I didn't have to have a lot of money. I didn't have anything like real estate or stocks or anything like that. But purely from the business streams of income I was able to create, I was able to retire. And the thing is, I didn't even have to join network marketing. So not saying that that's bad, but I did it all the ways that everybody told you couldn't do it. And here's what's awesome, is I thought as a financial advisor I have to save and accumulate millions and millions of dollars to then live off the interest and then retire. But the thing is, like, I had actually bad credit about a year and a half prior. I didn't have a whole lot of savings, but I was able to create cash coming in. And I realized very quickly, it didn't matter how much I had stored in all this cash. What mattered is how much I really have. And so if there's anything else you get from tonight, the big thing I want to make sure you get is that cash flow creates freedom. Because with more and more cash flow you have in your life, when you have a lot more income than you have expenses, that's when you actually have a lot more freedom. When it's opposite, when you have more expenses than income, then it really stinks, right? Life just feels like bondage. And so if you have a lot more income than expenses, it's amazing how that difference right there makes all the difference in your life. And that's what happened with me, is pretty soon I was able to have streams of income from my business coming in, paying me maybe $4,000 a month or so. And the thing is, that would cover all of my expenses at home. And then anything I did work-wise was just gravy. It was just bonus. And so, and it didn't require me working my tail off. I didn't have to work 40 or 50 hours a week. It was more like maybe 2 to 3 hours a week to do that. And so what I want to talk to you about today is exactly how does that work? Like, how can you have more cash flow? What are those strategies you can use that will actually really help you to get there? One website I'll refer you to as a resource is moneyripples.com. That's my website. On that homepage, there's a free ebook you can get that reviews the content we're actually talking about today. So if you want to have something like note-wise, and maybe you're trying to scramble to get some things down but you don't quite have it, there's a free ebook on there. It's like a 30-page ebook, and you just go on moneyripples.com and just get that for free. So in any case, but I want to give you even more depth than that today. But that'll be a good kind of a good reminder for you as we go through some of this content. So hopefully you're ready. You ready? Great. I can tell by the blinking light that you must be. So awesome. So let's talk about some of this. The first thing I want to address, and there's going to be some things I'll cover in about a week and a half that are really critical. Some things about, really about the mindset that needs to go with this. I'm going to give you more strategies with a little bit of mindset, but just so you know, there's a lot of concepts behind this that actually create a multiple factor here, a multiplier factor, so to speak. And so just know we'll be covering that in a week and a half. So if you think this is awesome today, wait till a week and a half later when we do this on Saturday, which is going to be a lot of fun. So just wait. So with cash flow, one thing you got to understand, and just make sure, is green showing up okay on this?
Red would be better.
What would be?
Red would be better.
Red would be better?
Red or brown, or brown.
Red or brown? Awesome. We can do that. All right. How about this? We'll leave cash flow up here, but we'll do some other points in red or brown. Now, I'll tell you, some people ask me, they say, well, Chris, how do you know this stuff really works? Besides the fact you retired, how do you really know? Well, I'll tell you, in 2007, one thing that happened with me is that, I got to a situation where all the people, I actually went out of retirement, I came back out of retirement again, decided I was going to teach a lot of the same stuff. And lo and behold, a lot of people I was teaching were involved in a lot of real estate. At the same time, my real estate wasn't doing so hot because I started to buy some real estate. And what ended up happening is I saw that when nobody else could pay me and then my real estate was going down, I started watching my cash flow decrease. And lo and behold, when I finally got the guts to look at what was happening, I found I was in the hole by over $15,000 a month. So in other words, what that means is that my expenses were about $21,000, my income was about $5,000 between my personal and my business life, and I had to somehow figure out how to bridge that gap. And the neat thing is that in a matter of 4 years, I was able to reverse that. And so this works no matter what situation you're in, whether you're making a lot of money, whether you feel like you're in the hole, doesn't matter, because not many people were an upside down millionaire like I was. So it's a lot of fun. So let's get into this a little bit here. So point number one to go along with that is that what you've got to do is you've got to make sure you track your money. The first problem I ran into is that I wasn't tracking it. You know, what happened is that I just, as long as money kept coming in, I just kept having it come in. I'd save some, I'd spend some, have lots of fun with it. You know, bought that nice $750,000 house to go with it, that nice Mercedes and everything else to show everybody how much money I had. The problem with that is that I was not being a proper steward of my money. In fact, that's going to be a big part of the conversation next Saturday when we talk about that, is how do we increase our stewardship and how to make that better. Well, see, I wasn't being a very good steward. I let pride get in my life a little bit, and I stopped doing the basics of just tracking my own money. And so when I actually started to look at it, that's how I actually knew I was in the hole by $16,000 that month. This is I finally had the courage and bravery to look at it, especially as I was watching my savings go like this, and my credit lines go like this, right? So we got to make sure we're always tracking. A great free resource you can use for your personal life is one called Mint.com. Mint is an M-I-N-T, like the, double your pleasure, double your fun with, extra double mint gum, kind of like that, right? So Mint.com is a nice free resource. We can have everything downloaded in. There's even phone apps and things like that for those of you that are more tech savvy than me. But you can have all those numbers come into one place. So all your income coming in, your expenses, you can have even your savings accounts and your loans and everything come into one place. And what's so nice is that you're able to take that money, be able to put it in, you can categorize it to the point where pretty soon it becomes autopilot. Pretty soon it starts to get its own brain, so to speak, where it actually remembers what kind of expense it was. So for example, if you shop at Costco, it's going to show up and saying Costco. If you categorize as groceries, from that point forward, it will always say groceries. So no more of the stuff, you remember in the days when they used to say, hey, get that little check register you put in the back of your checkbook, and you start writing out every little expense and every little paycheck. And you had to remember what was debit or credit, and you can't remember which side was which, and you're having to balance everything, write it out, do your own math, hopefully you don't screw it up, and then get it all done. And it'd take you at least several minutes a day to do that. On Mint.com, when I actually go in and do this, even for just my personal stuff, it'll take me maybe 4 minutes. In fact, when I've timed myself, even with a slow internet connection at times, it's been at least 4 or 5 minutes minimum, or a maximum, that it takes me to go in and for 1 week update all of my expenses, income, and everything. And so if you can imagine that, I mean, so many people spend so much time trying to become physically fit. They're trying to work out and do all these kind of things, right? They'll spend hours a week doing that. Well, how important is it for you to be financially fit as well? If you can only spend a matter of minutes per week. And so what I would ask you to do here is, for those of you that are here, as well as for those of you that are here online, what I'd recommend that you do is take some moment right now, and if you're on a computer, great, that makes it easy, but go into your calendar, or if you're with your spouse, it's even better, but coordinate with them, and just start coordinating, saying, when once per week can we spend at least 15 to 30 minutes each week? Is it an evening? Is it like a Monday evening, or is it a morning, like I do Wednesday mornings, for example, so like this morning, or wait, today's Wednesday, right? Yeah, so yeah, it was this morning. We got things like that. I have some people that like Saturdays, they might like Sundays or whatever. Whenever works for both of you as a couple, if you're married or if you're single, then nobody to coordinate with, it makes it easy. But make sure you just get together and say, right, when is it going to be that block of time we take? 15 to 30 minutes to just update our numbers. Make sure that we're on the same page as a couple. Because as I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of couples, I'll tell you, the one thing that's one of the biggest problems is that we don't know how to communicate, do we? We don't know how to come on the same page. We might think that we talk about money, but in reality, we really don't. And especially if you've ever seen a situation where one person thinks they've got money, the other person thinks they've got a certain amount of money, and then you both spend it separately. The next thing you know, you've gone over, or you've spent more than you expected, and now you're over budget, right? See, we don't want that to happen. And so pick that time, one day per week, whenever that is, and make sure you keep that as a reoccurring item on your calendar. Make sure it's always happening each and every week. Now, what if you're doing this? What if you're already doing this? If you're one of the rare few that's actually doing this, good job, I applaud you, you're awesome. Take it to that next level. Instead of just talking about the numbers, go from passive tracking to active tracking. So now you start to discuss things like, all right, well, how are we doing? You know, what's coming up this week? What are our plans? What do we need to plan for by what's money coming in? What money has to go out? You know, what are some bills that we need to pay? And even if you're doing that, I would take it to the next level. And I would say, great, how about your dreams and goals? What are things you want to accomplish? Look at the big picture and see what's really going on. And so find ways to make that work for you specifically of how can we take this to the next level? How can we make ourselves more on the same page? How can we take it to that next better level to really essentially do this? But then go beyond of how do we make sure we accomplish the goals that we have? And so this is a great place to start. Mint's awesome. By the way, if you have a business, I don't recommend you use mint.com. For your business numbers, I would recommend something like QuickBooks or Quicken, depending on what you prefer. QuickBooks is great because you can go online, you can get the physical software, you can do either. And it works just like Mint. In fact, it's the same exact company that does the same program. And so, for your business, use Quicken or QuickBooks. For personal, use something like Mint. That's free. There are other paid services out there. I've tried them. But for the value, I still haven't seen anything beat Mint, which is free. So again, I'm all about cash flow, so freeing up cash, there you go. Mint.com is great. Let me take it on another step too. So make sure you're doing that. I'll give you just a few seconds. Make sure you coordinate your schedules. Just do that right now. So, because again, just learning and hearing this stuff isn't enough. I want you to actually to apply it and get real results. So go ahead and just take a minute right now and just figure out what day of the week is going to work best for you. Go. All right, we good? Everybody good? Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I want to kind of take this to the next level now, because that's the easy stuff, right? So where are some of the common leaks I find when I start helping people track? You know, what are the things I typically find? You know, one thing I want to mention too is about the reason why this is so important is that you have to understand that there's this law of attention. Whatever you put your attention towards will expand and grow, but whatever you ignore will leave you. It's kind of like the law of atrophy or the law of decay, right? Think about it. If you go and work out, you put a lot of focus on working out and exercising and so forth, the likelihood is you're guaranteed to become more fit, at least in some way, shape, or form, right? At the same note, if you don't do those things, what happens to your health? Is your health going to get better or worse when you don't exercise and you don't pay attention to your health and nutrition? It gets worse, right? It's pretty obvious. The same thing applies to any area of life. That's how you know it's a true principle. Is that whatever you put your attention towards expands and grows. If you put more attention to your family, you'll notice that the love and the connection, the bonds you have will expand and grow. If you start ignoring them, they will leave you. You ignore your health, it will leave you. And if you ignore your money, it will leave you too. So you got to remember to make sure you put that attention towards what you're looking at. You can't turn a blind eye and say, well, I hope it all will work out. Because even if you do that now, one day you will live to regret it. This has got to be something that's on a daily, more of a weekly, even not just a lifetime basis of creating these habits and always being a good steward of the resources you have. Because it doesn't matter how much money you have, it's what you do with that money and how resourceful you are that makes all the difference in the world. And so make sure you really focus on this. That's why this is so important. I've had several clients where a lot of them will use a reason like they just don't have enough time, right? They'll say, well, I would like to, but I really don't have 4 or 5 minutes a week. You know, things like that. They'll say, I'm just too busy. One client in particular, a woman that I was coaching out in Silicon Valley, California, she had an IT company that she did. She was a contractor, would go out to different companies doing stuff. Her husband worked for the same company. They would work at least 60 to 80 hours per week and that's not just combined for two of them, that's each person. They hardly had a life together. They were making $250,000 a year, but they were going deeper and deeper into debt. And so, you know, when she came to me, she's like, I really want to do this. I know I need it, but I don't know if I have the time to really look at this stuff. And so I bugged her to death for a month and a half to give me just 1 month of numbers, just so I could have a snapshot to see what's going on. And you will not believe this, but after when she finally got those numbers in, and I don't know if she even looked at them, that's what was interesting, But remember, she was making $250,000 a year and going in the hole. So why? When we tracked the numbers and we looked at it, we found out just eating out, this is not groceries, but eating out, she was spending $5,600 per month just eating out. And I kind of was like, are you kidding me? Like, I swear, are you eating steak for breakfast or what's going on, lobster? And she had that nervous laugh. You know how you get that nervous laugh sometimes where you know it's true about you, but you don't want to admit it? So she had that nervous laugh. She said, well, actually, yes, that was kind of the case. And yeah, so we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're eating out all the time, and we just didn't track it. I said, my goodness, that's horrible. I mean, that's, for those of you in Utah, that's like eating at Lakai all the time, right? I mean, it's crazy. And so I said, you know what, let's just do this. I'm not about trying to live cheap. There's a reason why that ebook, if you've seen online already, is called Beyond Rice and Beans, because the thing is, not to mention names, but there's somebody out there that teaches about living off rice and beans that I don't really agree with. I think you should actually live and enjoy your life, but I believe you can have your cake and eat it too. You can still have and enjoy your life. You don't have to be cheap and have to kill yourself to get to the financial goals you have. You just have to be a little bit more innovative and creative to make it work. And so I said, let's just not like throw you from the hot tub into the cold pool. Let's just make this easier. What if we just make your eating out expense only $1,000 a month? Which I know a lot of you are thinking like, wow, $1,000 a month eating out would be awesome. And so I said, let's just cut it back to $1,000. We can cut back more later, but let's just be realistic here. I mean, you are pretty busy. You are out eating a lot. Let's just leave it at $1,000 a month. Well, what does that free up? Well, that frees up another $4,600 for her, right? On top of that, we found out with groceries and stuff that she had a live-in boy, not her boyfriend, but her daughter's boyfriend was living in, wanted to be a chef. So he bought like over $1,000 a month in groceries on top of that. And there's only two daughters, and that's it, two teenage daughters. So he's like, let's cut that back. So we got another $400 there. And then we did some other things. We found some taxes and things like that. When all was said and done, we freed up over $70,000 that year. Now, if you can imagine, even though she's making $250,000 a year, $70,000 is a pretty dramatic impact for her, let alone anybody, right? And that's the difference. And I'll tell you, she got really excited. Finally, she actually liked looking at her numbers again because she saw that it put money in her life essentially back into her pocket. She got her life back again. She almost went too overboard. She started trying to cut off her daughters completely and want to cut off their health insurance. I'm like, hey, don't go crazy here. Like, you don't have to be cheap. Again, you can still take care of them, but be responsible, be a good steward of those resources. And so she was able to free up a lot of money there. I've had a lot of people where, I'll tell you, food is oftentimes a big one for a lot of people. I don't try to judge on that too much because, for example, if I get a chiropractor, I've worked with like over 300 chiropractors, and so if I get a chiropractor, it's not too uncommon to see $1,000 a month of groceries because they're eating all organic or raw and things like that, so it's going to be more expensive. But if you're the type of person where you're spending a lot eating out and you've got $1,000+ grocery bill, and you don't have like 16 kids, then we probably have to question it a little bit, right? And so definitely look at that one. Food is definitely a big one for a lot of people. Is that I don't want you living on ramen because that's way worse because you might save money on food, but your medical bills are going like this, right? Because you're eating crud, pretty much. You're eating junk. So don't do that, but make sure you find ways to do more, to find more that way. So food's often a common one. Another one I find is sometimes like TV. One thing I didn't realize is that there's so much technology out there that a lot of times you can get the same TV for less. A lot of times I see bundle packages where somebody spend like $200 a month. I had one client that were overpaying on food big time, plus they had their TV, they're spending over $200 a month with their bundle package. And the husband's huge on sports, like he loves sports. So I said, all right, let's not get rid of that, but they were in the whole $1,500 a month. So understand that they're upside down. They're now, if they've already eaten through their savings, they're now eating into credit cards and stuff, $1,500 a month, right? And so we said, all right, we got to do something here. And so we said, let's get that, if any of you have heard this, like the Roku box, similar to Apple TV. So I said, you can get a Roku box for like $60. You can get Netflix and Hulu for about $17 a month. That $60 is one time. $17 a month with Hulu and Netflix. And from there, if you need sports, well, maybe you can work something out with the cable company. Well, he called them up and said, hey, I'm looking to cancel. Only thing I really love is the sports. They said, tell you what, we'll cut your bill from $200 down to $50 a month. And then he already had the Roku box, so he just had to add that 17, freed up like $135 right there. So oftentimes I find like TV, it can be utilities, but this one, not so much on utilities, but when it's usually like the bundle type packages like cable TV, I find stuff there. Another place I find is like waste of money in retirement accounts. I'll address this one a little bit more later, but sometimes they're putting more money in than actually is coming back out, so there's things like that. I see people wasting a lot of money, especially in the areas of loans, which I'll also address later too. I see a lot of things within the budget that are that throw me off a little bit, or at least give me some red flags. Oftentimes will be insurances. Let me talk about insurances for a little bit, because I actually believe you need to be really, really protected. You got to have a lot of protection here, because you just never know. I mean, you don't want to ever be in a situation where one event wipes you out completely, right? You want to make sure that whatever happens in your life, you're well protected. It's going to cover what you think it can. So my philosophy is actually almost counter of what some of those people will teach out there. Is you actually want more of that protection, including insurances. But I like to have my biggest bang for my buck. And so one really nice area you can free up money with insurances is by raising your deductibles. And this especially is effective if you've got any kind of cash savings or reserves in place. Because what happens is so many people will just get whatever they get. They have no clue why they get what they have. They're usually just sold by some person, or some lizard on TV says 15 minutes can save you 15% on car insurance, something like that, right? The thing is, like, what I've actually been able to do, even with my health insurance, for example, I was paying over $500 a month. I said, you know what, if I raise my health deductible, I get it up to $10,000, because if you've got the savings to build it, great, you can do that and cover that. So you got the deductible to $10,000. I went from over $500 a month, even with my age increase and the premiums increasing, down to about $360 a month. And that's for an entire family of 7, if you include me and my wife and my 5 kids. And so lots of raising deductibles. This works on car insurance, auto and homeowner insurance, disability, if you've got things like that. It's not a deductible, but they call them elimination periods. How long do you have to wait to get that benefit? I've seen a lot of people where they have like this 30-day wait. Well, get that up to 90 days and watch how much you might end up saving. It could be in the hundreds a month. So little things like that. You might want to look at your insurances and just check it out and see what's going on there. So lots of ways to leak money right there, right? I mean, tons. And there's all kinds of things. I mean, I know my kids definitely can burn through money at times too, but I mean, we'll go through some more tips here, but there's a ton. The big key here is, though, is just make sure you track it, know where you are, and make sure you follow through with it. Now, many people ask me about creating a budget, right? Like, should I create a budget, and how do I do that? First and foremost, I hate the word budget. I mean, doesn't budget kind of sound restrictive a little bit and sound kind of, I don't know, just horrible, right? I like to use the word spending plan, or phrase spending plan, because it feels a lot better, right? It's like, how are we going to spend that money? How are we going to use it? And one thing I like about that is if you're going to create a spending plan, budget, whatever you want to call it, right? Do not just randomly create some sort of spending plan or budget. Because if you've never done this before, it won't work anyways. And you don't want people out there like Susie Orman who says, you shouldn't even worry about having a budget because you won't follow it anyways. I think that's cruddy advice. Don't do that, but instead say, we got to do this first. If you can track for 6 to 12 months, especially on those variable expenses, things like utilities, food, things such as I don't know, I'm trying to think of other random variable expenses, but things with your kids, all those kind of things, lunch money or whatnot, all those kind of variable expenses and childcare and everything like that. If you don't know what those are, track it for 6 to 12 months. Get a good average over that period of time. Which the good news is that Mint.com actually does that for you. Another reason why I recommend it, because when you look at that category and you start categorizing that, you'll see that they'll give you a 6-month average of what you typically spend. And so, like with gasoline, for example, if you say you might spend more gasoline this month, then less the next, more this, then less. You might look something like that. They'll just come in there and they'll say, when you look at the category, when you click on it, it'll actually say your average is might say 172 a month. Let's just say, right? So if that's your average, for example, what you spend on gas, you say, all right, well, what can I make as my part of my spending plan? You'd say, all right, well, I'll just go up a little bit from that, give it a little bit of buffer just in case, And so usually I'll be somewhere, I might create a budget or spending aspect of between 175 to 180, because I like to make sure I build a buffer in there. There's nothing worse of a feeling when you feel like you've gone over budget, even though it may not be that bad, especially if you end up gassing at the beginning of the month and the end of the month, things like that. Really don't be too hard on yourself this way, but just make sure you're watching what's happening. You'll find way more money that's leaking out just from doing this. Another thing too is that when you watch your money, I had one couple that was actually from Western Utah, one of those other desert areas out there. And they actually came to me and they said, hey, here's our situation. They were $250 in the hole each month. And when we looked at it, one of the things we found there was they were paying a lot in bank fees. That's supposed to be an N, by the way. So they're paying a lot in bank fees to the tune of $300 a month. Now remember, they were in the hole $250 a month, right? So we said, all right, well, why is this happening? They said, well, we're just not really paying attention when we spend the money and what's in the account, so we just kind of spend it whenever. Said, all right, well, just by watching this a little bit more and just seeing what the money is and again, having that weekly meeting together, if we can get rid of this right here, that will now put you in a place where you were in the hole, in the red, $250 a month, to now you're in the positive by at least $50 a month. And by the way, they weren't rich people. They were making maybe $2,500 a month, and that was it. I mean, so it doesn't take much, but that for them made all the difference. And especially helped them pay down credit cards and things like that to get them in a better situation. And that's just with one place. So really be watching to see what's happening in there. Let's see. Am I okay to move on? Great, I like how you nodded your head. Awesome. So let's move on to the next point. So this one right here, I'm going to talk about, I'm definitely going to make this in big red, is taxes. We love taxes. By a guess, how many people do you think are actually business owners that are watching here online? I mean, how many of you in this room are business owners, just out of curiosity? Okay, awesome. Or entrepreneurs of some sort? Okay, I'll cover this then. So taxes, here's the awesome thing is that especially because this is being recorded, I love to pay taxes. I love to pay my fair share, just not more than my fair share. Unfortunately, what I've found with almost every one of my clients I've worked with, they're paying more than their fair share. And the reason is because, well, frankly, if you have an accountant, your accountant probably stinks. And I'm just going to say that flat point blank, because as awesome as they are, and they might be very well intentioned, and they probably have a lot of knowledge, if you don't have an accountant that's actively telling you how to save money in taxes, you're just sending your numbers to them and they spit numbers back out, and that's kind of how your relationship is, then it's probably, you have what I call as a passive accountant or a passive CPA. If they're even teaching you a little bit, that's better, but in most cases, even when they're teaching, I've still seen people that really don't have very good accountants. I had one client in particular where she was out in California, another one. Her accountant was the same one that Mel Gibson uses. If you guys know who Mel Gibson is, obviously, I'm definitely not a Mel Gibson. So I apologize. You probably would rather watch your TV with Mel Gibson than watching me right now. But she said, hey, I've got the best. Mel Gibson uses this guy. He's the accountant to the stars. And when we found out after we looked at their stuff, we said, oh, look, you're overpaying $20,000 a year in taxes. He's awesome. So, and not to mention he was more expensive too. So we said, let's cut that. Let's save some money there. Some common places to free up money in taxes. If you're not a business owner, I'm going to start with you. If you're not a business owner, you really only got a few places. You've got donations that can work. So for example, if you're going to donate things to Goodwill, for those of you in Utah, you might have a Desert Industries, or you might have Salvation Army. You can itemize up to, or not itemize, but you can write off up to $500 a year. After that, if you do more, you have to make sure you itemize it so there's an actual real value going with it so they know it's legit. So you can do that. There's donated charities you can do. Naturally, you probably write off things like mortgage interest and things like that. You've got kids, but we don't know how long that's going to last based on politics. We may not want to go into that, but then again, this is Kimber Academy. We can rip on politics a lot. So, but in any case, you've got a few options, but not a ton. If you're on the side of a business owner or an entrepreneur, you've got a lot more options. If you are the employee, what I recommend is maybe find a way to either take a hobby and turn it into a business. Even if it's not profitable at first, that's not a problem. Most businesses are not profitable in their first few years, no matter how big they are. So you might be able to do that, and that's fine. But you want to have something that maybe can be profitable. That's where network marketing can come in, and network marketing can be a great option because there's low overhead. and it can still create some income. And so if you're doing something where you're already buying products from a network marketing company, that could be an option for you. So find something you can do there, because there's a lot of options that happen that I'm going to talk about over here on this side. So employee side, not so much. Entrepreneur side, tons. Employee side, Other side. So I'm trying to keep you awake. Is that okay? Can I do that? All right, awesome. So taxes. So some of the things you can do with taxes. You guys just think I'm a total dork. Isn't that awesome? I love this. So you're going to notice that I love to just play around because, well, you can't be too serious about money. Money stinks. And I mean, you don't want some guy up here that's, big old conservative suit with a tie comes up to here with a big belly. Those guys are boring and just drive me nuts. So I want to give you something different tonight. So taxes. Here's an awesome strategy. Now, I will preface this by saying I am not an accountant. So therefore, talk to your CPA, talk to your accountant about this stuff, because I can't advise you on any of these things. But here's some things that I do for myself to save on taxes. Number one, hopefully I'm going to do this in a different color here for you. So number one, an easy thing to start tracking is your mileage. What mileages are you driving? I think that was a proper word to use. So mileage. So auto expenses and things like that. The nice thing right now is that you can write off 55.5 cents per mile for mileage. And I think this year it actually goes up to 56.5, if I recall. Check with your accountant. But in any case, 55.5 cents a mile to 56.5, whatever it is, that means about every 2 miles you drive, you're able to write off $1 on your taxes. And so what that means is anything that's business related. So if you're driving from point A to point B, if it's between business to business or whatever you're doing in those activities, you can write that off. Now, what if you also have a job? So maybe you have a part-time business and a job at the same time. A lot of times you can't write off going back and forth between your job. Because a lot of people ask me, like, well, can we write that off? And the accountant will say, no, you can't. But what can you do on the route to going to that job? Can you, for example, stop off at a grocery store or a laundromat or something like that where there's a cork board? You know how you see those cork boards with people's want ads and things like that? You can go and pin up a business card on there, and you're able to write off the entire trip round trip, especially if you have a home office, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you write that all off. You can write off trips when you're going to events. I have everybody that works with me, because I talk about business and their personal life, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Well, the cool thing is that everything they do with me is a write-off. Even if they travel and do stuff with me and they buy a book, great, it's a write-off. I mean, everything can be a write-off, which is awesome. So mileage is a big one. So make sure you track your mileage. And you need to track it with pen and paper, all that kind of stuff, right? I actually track, because I do so much business mileage, and I try to keep my cars separate for each. I actually track do not mileage, or not business mileage. So that at the end of the year I don't have to do all the math, and I don't have to track every single day. I just write the mileage off from the odometer from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and then whatever miles I drove that were personal miles, and I take that off of the total, and voila, I've got my miles. So it's really easy. But if you drive less than business miles, then that's different. So mileage is a really, really big one that most people miss, and a lot of times we have to go back and amend returns to be able to get money back. Number two, one nice thing is about business owners, you can write off professional fees. So like your accounting. So when you go see your accountant, if you're just an employee, you cannot write that money off. But when you go to see your accountant or an attorney, you can write all that stuff off. Number three, education. I'm not just talking about like your kids' education per se, but if you're doing anything that can be considered education in your business or training and development, things like that, that is absolutely a write-off. So anytime I buy a book, I can write that off. Occasionally, because, if you take this to the next level, again, I want you to be careful because I don't want people going out doing crazy things, but, when I do my events, because I put on events a lot of times, like I have one in 2.5 weeks, when I do an event, I, of course, play music. Well, naturally, I'm going to download the music I like into iTunes and use it for that. And so all that money I spend in iTunes, even buying the iPod and everything else, yes, I write off on my business because I'm using that in my business. Does my wife steal it from me? Yes, absolutely. Does that mean I can't write it off? No, I can still write it off. But, of course, I'm not doing events 24/7, so there you go. So if I'm going to download music that I like, I might as well make sure it works into my events. Plain and simple. So like I said, books and seminars and trainings, all that kind of stuff you can write off. It's awesome. I'm running out of room here, but there's a lot. I can give you a lot more than this board has room for, but I'm only going to give you some of the top ones that I see that people miss a lot of times. Number four, is your kids. You can write off kids. For example, it's possible you could actually hire your kids to work a job. Now you're like, well, what can they do? Take out garbages and trash? Yes, they can clean the house or clean, especially if you have a home office or even a normal office. Whatever it is, you can have them go and clean it and do things to pay them for it. My mom actually hired me. My mom's a professional oil painter. She hired me when I was 8 years old. I mean, right when I turned 8, she's like, good, I can hire you. I didn't realize why she was hiring me. I thought it was just for me. You know, I thought like, oh, cool, I get to take free art lessons and stuff. So she would actually stack up the hours. I was getting paid, I think, $3.15 an hour back then, something like that, whatever the wage was. So I was getting paid that, and we would stack that up to eventually go and pay for my art classes I would take in her own gallery. What was interesting is, of course, she was writing off everything. So didn't know that was awesome, but hey, there you go. But you can hire kids. Now, what if you have really, really young kids, like little kids? It gets a little bit harder to write them off, but is it possible that your kids could be a model for your business? Could they be doing photo shoots and things like that? You can be able to say, you know what, I'm going to pay you a basic modeling fee for working for my business. Because, hey, I just did a photo shoot with my product. I have my kids playing with it or doing whatever they're doing, depending on what your business is. And voila, you're paying your kids for being models. And here's what's cool. If it's done with the right entity, the right corporate structure, if you have the right corporation in place, you can actually not only pay them that money, but they don't pay any taxes on that up to about $6,000, or $5,950 to be exact. So, cool thing is you can then pay them, and here's what's awesome about cash flow, is that if you can pay your kids, let's say $3,000 a year, let's just say you do that. Well, who says that $3,000 could not be used to go put back into their schooling, right? Who says it couldn't be used to go put back into their, not only their education, it can be put into shopping for them, especially with my kids. Holy cow, it gets expensive shopping for them. You know, especially as they keep growing. It's like the pants you just bought them last week, now they're too short, right? So you got to buy clothes. You can do that. You can pay for their sports. You can base, essentially all the things you can't write off normally that you're paying for anyways, you can now write off because you're paying your kids. Pretty cool, huh? So that's another way. And I'll end with number 5 because, well, we're going to run out of room. But so here's a big one right here, is that number 5 is you can have what I've mentioned before, is you can have a home office. Now you can write that off a few ways. Usually when you have a home office, you take like the square footage of your room, whatever you use, whatever workspace you use, take the square footage, divide it to the total square footage of your house, and that's what you can write off percentage-wise of your utilities, your things like insurances specifically, and things like that. Now, so let's use an example. Say your house is 2,000 square feet, and your square footage of your workplace is 200 square feet. Well, that means that it's 1/10, so you get to write off 10% of anything there. Now, for those of you that maybe have a lot of profit in your business, you can take this to the next level. Just this year, they started making it a little bit more acceptable. People used to do home office leases where you pay yourself rent, but you have to claim that as rental income. You'd save a little bit of money, but not a lot. Well, now there's ways where things through like corporate rent agreements where you can rent your house for 1 day, pay yourself 1 day a week or a month, 1 day a month, because you don't go over that 14 days a year, and you pay yourself, and according to my CPA, check with yours, of course, if they even know about this, because most don't, but my CPA says you can max out at $1,250 a month. So if you think about it this way, if you want to be able to take home more money but not get taxed on it, you're to say, well, wait, I can take home that money, but now $1,250 a month, that's $15,000 a year that now you're paying yourself that is not taxed at all. So no income tax and no Social Security tax, which can be a killer, can't it? So you have no those taxes at all. That's $15,000 a year you're writing off on your taxes right there. If you do it right, and you have all the right meeting minutes and things like that. But that's, for depending on your tax bracket, could save you net between $3,000 and $6,000 a year. Pretty awesome, huh? Was that worth your $10? For some of you, that probably is worth way more. Some of you, you're like, I think I got it on mileage alone, right? So taxes, there's a lot of stuff you can do there. Way more than I can cover and more than I want to cover because it's just, no, they're taxes. They're not that exciting. So, are we good to move on? So that's taxes. There we go. That's my best impression of Vanna White. And definitely not the body of Vanna White either, sorry. All right, so moving on. The next one here. Let's see, I'm gonna stay with Brown here for a second. So the next place that I find that you start to have some real leaks that are happening And this is actually not so much a leak, but a way to actually get past your leaks. Is I recommend that there are times that you need to look at selling assets. What is it you can sell that can actually be able to put you in a better place? So when I was in the whole $15,000 a month, I had a few choices. I couldn't just pull money out of thin air, but I had to look at my situation and say, well, where do I have assets? Where are things that I have that I'm not using? You know, I mentioned about before you can give like donations to things like DI or to you know, like Salvation Army or something like that. But I had to figure out, I'm like, well, I need to find ways to pay off loans and debts and things like that to get myself in a better cash position. And so I thought, well, what do I have? So essentially I went through storage. I said, all right, what do we got in storage that's not being utilized? Because as you'll hear me talk about next week, that stewardship, if you're not going to use it, we'll try to find a way to get rid of it or sell it. It's pretty much the way I see it. If you're not going to use it, get rid of it or sell it. Donate it or sell it, one of the two. And so that's what we did. And we had like extra furniture and things like that we just weren't using. And so we said, all right, what do we want to get rid of? We want to keep some stuff here, but what can we sell off that really is just a waste of space? And especially if you're one of those people that you can't even park into your own garage, you probably have way more than enough to sell. I can guarantee it. And so I remember one summer we ended up selling about $3,000 worth of stuff by the time it was all said and done. And it was a rough time. I mean, there was times where I had to keep all my money in my business. I couldn't even take a check home. That was sometimes the stuff that actually got us through that month. And so look at finding ways of what can we sell. A lot of times I see people that have things like maybe they have an extra car that's just sitting there doing nothing because they think someday they might do something with it, right? And they're like, well, I want to sell it. I just haven't taken the time to do it. Well, do it. Just get rid of it now. You know, get rid of that. I have some people that are like, well, I've got like this boat, this four-wheeler, but I don't really use it anymore. Get rid of it. You know, if you've got, you know, like I mentioned, furniture, some things like that. You know, maybe you have an old TV that's sitting in your closet, like actually we do. You know, one of those old huge tubes that like weigh like 500 pounds, you know, and we got one of those we just need to get rid of. We just don't want to carry it, right? So sell it. You know, get rid of the stuff that you're not going to use, because who can say, I mean, imagine if you could take that cash and be able to use it not only to get through the month, but what if you could use it to pay down loans and other things like that? And so selling assets can be a real good one for sure. All right, we good so far? Yeah? Are we doing on time? Still good? Awesome. So next one here I want to focus on a little bit is, I mentioned a little bit about retirement, so I want to make sure I bring that back up. So one thing, and this is always a case by case, but this is one way I find people be able to save money, because sometimes they're just strapped month after month. They're like paycheck to paycheck. One thing I talk about here is stopping retirement contributions. Yes, I did just say that. Stop funding the IRAs and the 401ks. Is this a permanent solution? Absolutely not. But the one thing I see a lot of times, I have one client right now, in fact, where every month he's negative. So essentially he builds up cash and savings, like one time a year when he gets a big bonus, and then basically whittles it down to nothing by the end of that year, just in time to get the next bonus, and then it whittles down. And when we look at it, we realize, like, wait a minute, you're putting away $1,500 a month into these accounts, but you have to keep, if he ends up going over, what ends up happening is he ends up going into credit cards. So his credit card balances are going up while his retirement accounts are going up. And in my mind, it's kind of ridiculous to put money into retirement when you have a high interest credit card going up. And so if you're charging credit cards and you're putting into retirement, just stop it. Stop the contributions, use that money to start paying down those loans. Because the thing is, I can guarantee you a retirement account will not beat a credit card. Almost ever. And this has come from a guy who used to sell mutual funds. He used to tell you that you could actually average 12%, which is a bunch of bull. You won't average 12%. The real rate of return in your retirement account, if you're lucky, especially after fees, and by the way, if you have a 401k, you probably got more fees than everybody else. But if you've got those fees, if you throw those in there, you might be lucky to get 5 or 6% per year net return. So 5 or 6 versus a 9% or more percent credit card, I think it's kind of a no-brainer, right? But so often you're sold so often to just throw that money into those retirement accounts. Stash it in there. Put it in a place where you can't even use it. You can't even get to it. You feel like you have to ask mom and dad for the car keys even to touch your own money. Because even if you put in those retirement plans, you have to ask for a loan to get it back out because you can't touch it. Or if you do touch it, you get penalized and slapped. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, you gotta have more. I'd rather have you have more liquid cash here in savings, emergency savings here, than having cash up here that you can never touch. And so the retirement accounts, really, trust me, they won't be there in the future if you keep keep losing money over here. Eventually, you'll have to tap into those to pay those off, and then you'll be 55 years old, like a lot of my clients, and saying, I just spent the last dollar of my retirement, now what? And that's why. It's like this rubber band effect. You grow, and then you shrink. You grow, and you shrink. Instead of finding a way to keep growing where it's done in wisdom and order, instead of just trying to do it crazily. So retirement accounts really are not that cool to keep funding when you've got other stuff over here leaking money like crazy. So that's the context there. If you're just stopping retirement accounts to stop it and then blow money, totally different story. I don't really recommend that unless you're dying. And hopefully that's not the case. So, you go with that one, right?
But maintain the retirement accounts when you've got plenty of extra.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Maintain the retirement accounts when you have plenty of extra to pay them, right?
Yeah. So you're talking about maintaining them, like keeping them safe and liquid, you mean, or what?
Well, there's no reason why I'd get rid of it if I don't have, I mean, there's plenty of money to pay for the retirement accounts.
Uh-huh. Yeah, if you got plenty of money to pay for the retirement accounts, great, yeah. If you got more than enough surplus, it's awesome. But now, the type of retirement accounts, the traditional stuff, I usually don't recommend because they're going to cost you more money than make you in the future. But it's better than nothing, that's for sure. So, yeah, you want to make sure you save your money for sure. Yeah, the whole key is, again, is stewardship, right? You want to make sure you're increasing and growing your stewardship, not shrinking it. I would recommend, though, that when you're looking at retirement accounts, find ways to keep them safe, because there's no reason to build it up to 100 grand and then watch 20% of it disappear in the market, and then you have no say in the matter. It just disappears. Regardless if you've got a match, which, by the way, the match really doesn't increase your returns that much. Everybody says, well, I get a 100% match. It's not a 100% rate of return, though. If you get a 3% match on top of your 3%, it's only going to be an increase of a 3% return when you put it in the calculator. And so every year you do that, actually your match decreases interest over time. When you look at compound interest and things like that, it actually becomes less and less potent over time. Initially, though, when you have like a 401k with a match, it's awesome. Because if they match dollar for dollar, it is like a true 100% return. But every year you have it, it actually becomes less and less and less. So, anyways, I mean that's a rabbit hole that we go down a little ways. But yeah, the whole point is that definitely if you've got surplus and you're not losing a lot of money here, or if you have plenty of cash reserves on the side, I actually have people where they don't have 6 months reserves. If you don't have that, it's probably not worth having the retirement account or building that up more. I wouldn't say cash it out, but you'd probably be better off to start redirecting that money into emergency savings, building that 6 months reserves. And when that's there, then go back to the retirement account again. Because hey, savings is savings wherever it is. And again, your retirement accounts, if it's one of those that goes up and down like this, you might have a much better chance of having money, having it savings, than putting in a place like a retirement account where it may or may not return you any money. So, yeah, great question, great point. So that's that one. Now, the next one I want to talk about is debt. How many of you love debt? Don't raise your hands all at once. That's awesome. Okay, so debt. I'm actually going to take this word and we're going to cancel this out and call it liability. And this ties in a little bit what I'll talk about next week. But when you have loans, that is not debt. I want to be clear, is that when you have loans, that is not debt. You might call it that, but it's not debt. You only have debt when there's negative equity. So for example, many of you might have been in a situation in the last few years where you might have had a house that was worth $300,000 at one point, and maybe you had a $300,000 loan on it. But then all of a sudden the market tanks, and your house is no longer worth $300,000, now it's only worth $200,000, right? So you're upside down. Well, when you factor that in, what that gives you is that you're now in debt by $100,000. That is your debt in that situation when it's a negative number. If it were reversed, where this is now how much your house is worth, is $300,000, and you owe $200,000, this is now a positive number, you now have $100,000 of equity. Because the thing you have to remember is that debt and equity are opposite. In fact, that's the reason why if you ever go to Yahoo Finance, you see companies that are out there, they'll say debt to equity ratios. They won't say debt to debt ratios or anything like that, or debt to assets. You either have an asset or a liability. So when you have a loan, it's actually a liability, not a debt, because it's the opposite of the asset. So, but yeah, if you have a negative number here, then yes, you are in debt. So when people get on that particular radio show with that guy that tells you to go be debt free, it has you scream it to Braveheart music and everything. In reality, you were probably already debt-free beforehand, but he made you feel guilty enough that you kept scrimping and saving and living off rice and beans forever to finally get to that point. And then you paid off all your loans and all your debt to then say, I'm free, and then you say, no, I'm not, because I still have 70% of my expenses going out to non-debt things. And then you say, well, now I'm broke, because now I have zero savings and zero debt, but I'm nowhere. So that happens quite often with people. In fact, I see a lot of people have money leaks just emotionally because they can't see past this thing. The key thing is here is you don't want to fear debt or fear liability. You want to respect it, though. Because if you just keep looking at this as like it's something you fear, what will happen is it will keep showing back up in your life, one way or the other. Even when you get be quote-unquote debt-free, as people will say, a lot of times you're not, or you'll go right back in, because it's just this vicious cycle you put yourself into. Either way, you'll be mentally broke your entire life, and you'll always feel broke, even if you do have money someday. So it's a liability that we want to work on. So to do this, one thing to free up some cash that helps people a ton is by doing things like refinancing. Can you refinance or renegotiate some of your loans? I see this a lot of times. I had somebody who they want to serve a church mission in 5 years. All they had left was just their mortgage. And as aggressively as they're going, they want to get on their mission. They want to get it paid off. The only problem is they still have all these other expenses, so they would use all their savings to pay it off. They could not go on a mission. But I had to reemphasize, I said the whole part of this is how you have more cash flow. So we said, let's refinance this instead. How do we get this to a point where you could actually manage it and make it possible in 5 years? Otherwise, you might be 75 or 80 at minimum before you can even make it. And so we said, let's refinance it, freed up over $2,000 a month, and then all of a sudden now they have plenty of money in savings, more than enough to pay off their loans at any time, but now they have enough cash flow and enough savings to pay off all of those monthly payments that they're paying on those loans, like their mortgage, and be able to go just fine and still come back, have more in savings, and still have the ability to pay off their loan. And that's the difference, is that there's got to be that choice, that freedom there. Once you've got rid of all that money, if you're just trying to pay off all the debt too fast, I've seen too many people have this rubber band effect where they pay off debt and then they expand, they have more. They pay it off and then it grows more because they don't do it right with the right amount of wisdom and order and common sense. And trust me, I was the guy that tried to do the opposite effect, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I ended up losing over $1 million in debt, is because when I couldn't get to my equity, I wouldn't be able to get to that money because it wasn't in savings. I didn't build equity to the side. I ended up being in a worse situation than a better. And so to me, having the ability to pay off loans at any time, having the cash pay them off, is way more liberating than paying it off and having no money in savings. Does that make sense? Not if that's the case. I can't see you guys on here, so just mentally nod. So refinancing, looking ways to restructure it. I love it if you can save more on interest. That's great. That's a definite huge thing there. But at the same time, that's not always the most benefit. Many times I've seen people, they'll pay so much to certain loans, like a mortgage or like a car loan, that they start running up credit cards at the same time. Or they try to pay it off so fast, and then they have like nothing in savings. And then when something happens, all of a sudden now, there's no money here, and the place they have to go is right to the credit card. And what's the whole purpose of trying to pay down a 4% or 5% mortgage or a 4% or 3% car loan, only to run up a 20% credit card? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And so you got to, again, do it with the right wisdom and order. And so with refinancing, I like to try to find out how we can have the most cash freed up, especially if you're an employee, you get laid off. This is huge, right? If you get laid off, and let's just say that you, instead of refinancing to a longer term, you refinance to a short 10-year mortgage. Now your payment, say for example, the payment went from $1,500, now all of a sudden you're paying $2,500 a month. If you get laid off, you have to now pay $2,500 a month. Does that put you in a better position? Not at all, right? If you said instead, if we can get this instead to $1,000 a month, but you have the choice that you still take that $1,500. You could throw it on there if you wanted to. If you're not going to put in savings, put it back on the loan. But if anything were to happen to you, at least if you're laid off, now you're only responsible for this, the $1,000, not for the $2,500. So that's one of the big keys, is how do we get it to the place where the cash flow is maximized? You have options and choices. And again, you have to be a good steward, because if you're not, what will happen is you'll lower this to 1,000, and then you won't have this either, right? You'll have to be in probably not any better spot than you would have been anyways. Here's the thing, though. I see a lot of people say that, yeah, you got to almost make people become brainless with their money, which I think is completely opposite of what we should be. Because how can that be empowering? How can we be truly free? How can we be liberated if we turn our brains off? And so instead of turning your brain off saying, you know what, we should just take the control out of people's hands. We should not let them have that money. The thing is even if they don't have that money, people that are like really bad spenders, for example, they'll blow it anyways. So it doesn't matter what money you give them, they'll blow it. It doesn't matter what you teach them, they'll blow it. You gotta be a good steward first. And that's why we're covering that more on Saturday. So finding ways to get these payments lower to more. I yesterday renegotiated on one of my last student loans. I said, you know what, I wanna free up more cash. What can I do? Talk to them, cut the payment in half. Went from like 119 bucks a month down to 60. I was like, sweet. I can always pay more, but I love showing more profit. And especially if you ever want to if you want to refinance a mortgage, you want to show lower payments to the bank because the bank does not want you to have high payments. Because I've seen people in this situation where they have 800 credit scores, they're paying huge amounts of money every single month. They might even have a little bit of savings, but the bank will deny them a loan because they say, no, you're too risky. And that's the important thing to remember with debt is that way a bank looks at you and the way that you're taught as a consumer versus what I call as being a creator or being a good steward, you're taught two different philosophies. Because a bank, if you think about what they do, everything you've learned about money has come from a bank or a financial institution. Everything. If you look at, for example, if you think about what a bank really wants, obviously we know they want your money, right? But how often do they want your money? What do you guys think? How often does a bank want your money? Like all the time, right? How much of your money do they want? Yeah, as much as you will give them, right? How long do they want to keep your money for?
As long as you leave it with them.
Forever, right? In fact, if it's an IRA, they'll say, hey, you can put your money into a stretch IRA, so when you die, it'll go on to your children, and then they can't touch it either, right? It's brilliant. And then the fourth thing, how much do they want you to take back out when you come back in for it?
None.
None, right? And here's the fifth thing. How much risk does the bank want to take on themselves? Therefore, how much risk do they want you to take on? All of it. That's the 5 basic rules of any type of bank, right? You don't have to be a genius. I had an 18-year-old girl who's never had a bank account get these questions right. That's how hard money really has to be, right? Is that they want your money as often as possible, they want as much of it as possible, keep it as long as possible, give as little back as possible, and then take as little risk with their money as possible. Here's what's crazy. What are we taught to do with our money? The same thing, right? Put it in how often? As often as we can. How long are you supposed to put it in for? Don't dare touch it before you're 59 and a half, right? You know, how much is it supposed to be? Well, hey, more the merrier, because if you didn't save enough, that's okay, just put in more, you know? I see some people that, based on the projections that they were given from financial planners, all of a sudden by the time they're finally said and done, they're like, oh, well, you need to put in 50% of your income now. Oh, why don't you just tell me that in the beginning? You know, that's really realistic, right? And then, of course, do they want you to take the money out? No. You ever hear them say, live off the interest? Isn't that like the ideal? Why does a bank want you to live off the interest?
They can still invest the principal and make more money on it.
Bingo. They still invest the principal and make more money, right? You know, and of course, why do they want to take high risks? Does high risk really create high returns? No. If that were the case, the highest risk I can do right now with my money is go play Powerball. Could be potentially high returns, right? But what's the downside?
Most likely.
Yeah, it's not going to work, right? I'm going to totally lose my money. And that's the point, is that the banks teach us to play by the opposite rules of what they play by. They play by the rules that work. They teach us the rules that don't work, right? They teach us to basically how to be broke our entire lives and rely on them, and they basically go out and they create more cash flow. But like you said, like they want to be able to take your money and make more with it. The cool thing is for the banks is that they're legally allowed through Congress to loan out 10 times the amount of money that you give them. So if you put $10,000 into your savings account, they can loan out $100,000. Now here's what's crazy, and the reason I bring this up in this situation when we talk about debt and loans and so forth, is that with a bank, when they take your money in savings, what is that to them? That's a what? It's a loan, right? Because is it their money? No. We're loaning money to them. So if we use the traditional vocabulary, I know I just told you to use the word liability, but if we say the word debt, right? They're basically going into debt to you when you put your money in savings. Now here's what's crazy. So say you gave them $10,000, right? And I just said, and say that you got paid an awesome 2% rate of return on your CD. So it's a 5-year CD, you make 2%. So in 1 year, you made a whopping $200. That's their debt payment to you, right? And that's even if you take it out. You know, you may not take it out, but that's what they're owing you, right? That's $200. Now, if they can now take instead $100,000 and say they don't make 2%, they make 4%, that's not a 2% rate of return. Is that 4% with $100,000? Now it's hard to see the 100,000.
It's 4,000.
Is that's right, it's $4,000, right? So if you could take $200 and make $4,000, would you worry about being in debt? Never, right? That's what the bank does every single day. Heck, even if they only made $400, maybe they didn't leverage all their money. $400, that's still better than $200. Yeah, if that were the case, would you want to borrow more and more money? The hard thing is that they're telling us to do the opposite because they don't want us to do that very same thing, right? You know, only unless you're getting like business loans and so forth, they want to see a return on their investment. But for the most part, they're telling you to be a consumer, not how to be a producer or a creator, as I like to call it, right? And so this is what's awesome is that you never see a bank calling you up saying, you know what, boy, I hate being in debt to you. I really hate it. I just hate the emotions I have. I can't sleep at night. Because do you know what 2% can do to you over the life of your entire life? What I have to pay you? It's horrible. You know how much that is in interest that I'm losing? Oh, I hate being in debt. You know what? Just take your money back. I don't want it in savings. Just take it back. Will you ever hear a bank say that? Never, right? No, it's because, again, they know how to be the proper stewards of this money. But it's so funny how we're taught that exact opposite. Now, I'm encouraging you to go and blow a bunch of money and take out a whole bunch of debt. Am I saying that? Not at all. What I'm teaching here is that the rules that we're taught usually come from the banks and financial institutions, and I saw this firsthand when I was a financial planner. I mean, I thought it was really interesting when, this is right before I left, this is when I started questioning everything a little bit, is there was a guy that came in to introduce a new product about indexed type of funds, right? So you don't lose any money in the market, so you get all some of the upswings, but none of the downswings, right? Sounds awesome. And I did the math on it, I said, man, in fact, all the guys in our office did the math, and we said if we had our money from 1995 to 2005 in the indexed funds versus the one with the market, even with the huge 90s and then the crash 2000s and a little bit of upswing in the mid 2000s, we would have more money in the index funds than the variable ones with the market. And so I remember the guy, he left the training, I cornered him in the parking lot, and I asked him, I said, well, we just did the math. We would have been all better off doing this thing you just presented tonight. So why shouldn't we just sell that to everybody? And he said, well, and this time I was in my late 20s. He's like, well, you're young, you can take the risk. This is just for old people and people like that, like, where we want to give them a product they'll actually buy. And so essentially for him, it was like, we just want to give them variety so they'll buy something. So if they don't like the market, this is the other option. You'll do better in the other variable market. I'm like, you don't even realize the 90s were better than any other time. And you're telling me that still stunk and you want me to still not do index funds. And I realized, I'm just a salesman in a suit. That's all I'm taught, is I'm just taught to be a salesman. And that's what I realized here with all these rules, is that they're just teaching us the same things, just through different people. So when you turn on the news and you turn on the financial talking heads out there, they're all employed, one way or the other, by philosophy or by paycheck, because a lot of them are paid by those people, to sell you this bill of goods that's all about how to just turn your money over to them, for them to be the stewards of your money, not you. And then you think it's awesome because you just made 5% last year, while they're going and making a lot more than that. And that's why the banks have the biggest houses, because you go into any city and who has the tallest skyscrapers? It's the bank, right? You know, where we find ourselves as Americans struggling and saving and scrimping every single month, paying off our debts, doing everything we've been taught to do as good boys and little girls, only to realize we don't have squat. And we start to realize that when we see our parents and our grandparents, we say, well, you're just as broke as I am. You're not any better off. In fact, I'm going to have to probably take care of you because it didn't work for you, even though you've been debt-free and you've been paying off all your savings. So there's my little soapbox for you. So that's, when I bring this up about debt, you have to understand that it's not just about that. So when we try to refinance, what we're trying to do is free up more cash to then say, great, can we put it to better use? Can we put it back onto that loan, but have the option, the choice, or do we put it somewhere else where it's going to make us more money? For those of you that are in business, the likelihood is you probably can make more money in your business than putting it back onto those loans. If you can't, you might want to question whether or not you should be in business. Because if that's the case, you might want to just go back and get a job, have that security, and not the freedom. Because remember, security and freedom are complete opposites. So if you want security, great, there's a cost to it. There's freedom too, but again, there's responsibility that goes there as well, and you have to be a good steward of these resources. That's why I keep telling you, stewardship is key, because without it, none of this stuff will work. Make sense? We're good? Good? Yep, so good. So let me teach you one thing about when we do pay down loans, which one do we pay off first? Now this is a big one because I don't usually share this in normal formats. Usually you have to pay to do this. So this is a big thing because when I realized I had a lot of debt and I had a limited amount of cash, I said, well, what's going to be the best use of my cash? Because I could take whatever left I have in savings, I can go maybe put a down payment on a property or go put into marketing in my business or whatever, and that might make X amount of dollars. Or do I take that same amount of money and put it into a loan and pay that off? It might make me X amount of dollars in cash flow every month. So which one do I do? And in all that, I used to try to calculate interest and rates of returns and stuff. Most of the time people would get lost in the numbers. So I created a very simple index to make it easy. So here's the point. When I want to pay off a loan, this is the thing that I do. The basic thing is I want to pay the lowest amount of money for the biggest return on investment with the cash flow. So when I'm looking at a loan, I want the lowest payment or lowest balance of loan to the highest payment ratio. So if you look at it this way, I take the balance of the loan, divide it by your minimum monthly payment, and you're going to get what I call, I'll put that in different writing here. It's the, I'll even do over this, the cash flow index. So cash flow index is this. It's balance divided by your minimum monthly payment. So, say for example, let's kind of zoom back out. Say you've got a $10,000 credit card that you're having to pay $200 a month on, which is pretty typical for a credit card, between $200 to $250 a month. You've also got a $10,000 car loan, even at a lower interest rate, that you're paying $500 a month. Now, let me separate that for a second. So this is your credit card. This is your car. And we'll even say that this credit card is at 18% interest, and this car is at 4% interest. Now, if you were to talk to almost anybody out there today,
They'll say pay off the highest interest first.
exactly, they'll say pay off the highest interest first, right? They'll say pay it off, get rid of it. If all you have is $10,000, you had to pick one or the other, go for that credit card, right? When I use my cash flow index, I go for the opposite. It might be the highest interest rate, but I tell people it really is a basic rule of thumb, you might want to write this down, is that I just ignore the interest rate. I tell people just to ignore it. If it's a tiebreaker, great, we'll focus on the interest rate. But if it's not, like this kind of situation, no way. Because the index over here on this one is a 50. And over here, oops, we'll go on this side, is a 20. So what does that mean? Well, if I put real life back in this, common sense back in this, and remember, everything I try to teach is about common sense with money, not common practice, but common sense. Because if I just pay off this credit card, I do free up to $200 a month. That's a win. That's good. But if anything were to happen to my income or expenses were to rise for any reason, I still have to keep paying this $500 a month. Is that going to create more scarcity and fear in my life? Absolutely, right? But what if I got rid of that 500? Say, you know what, I don't want that anymore. This 500 is gone. Now I have that 500 cash flow to do whatever I need to do with. What feels better? Having to keep paying $500 a month or only paying $200 a month? Yeah, paying $200 is much better. And by the way, could I take that $500 and tack it on that $200 and pay it $700 a month? Sure. But if I have a bad month, can I have the option to not do that and keep it over here so I don't have to run up the credit card anymore? Could I do that too? And that's the point, is that it's a little bit counterintuitive, but if you look at common sense, and especially when I've seen in my life the difference, that you can have tons of net worth, you can have tons of money, but if you don't address the cash flow situation, that money can be quickly depleted and gone. And the next thing you know, you'll say, wow, I've got equity in a house, I've got equity here and here, but I can't get to it. I'm stuck, now I have all these expenses, and ooh, I'm not doing well right now, right? And that's the point, is that I want to pay off the lowest one, the lowest index first. The lower the number, the more I want to pay it off. The higher the number, the more I don't want to pay it
How
off.
did you get the index? I'm a little lost. How do you get the
Yeah,
index?
so I take the balance, so this 10,000 divided by 200. Here, I'll take off some of these numbers here. Now we ignore the interest rate, right? There we go. So 10,000 divided by 200 is 50.
Okay.
10,000 divided by 500 is 20, right?
Okay.
And the same thing, if 10,000 was $100 a month, it would be 100. If it was $50 a month, it would be 200. So for example, a mortgage is very common right now. Let's say you have a $200,000 mortgage. It's very common to see you paying $1,000 a month with principal and interest payment, not including taxes, insurance, and all that stuff. So it's very common to see a mortgage nowadays with the interest that's gone down at a 200. And so I get some people, they're like trying to focus on paying on that mortgage. They'll have this stuff, but they'll want to pay that down. I'll say, you know, by paying extra to that mortgage payment, that 200, compared to paying this one down instead, or paying it off, it's 10 times more effective to pay that off than this one. That's what that's saying. So it's 10 times the bigger bang for your buck. And so I teach that because I don't want this stuff. I'm like, you know what, I'll pay minimum payments all day long. If I can take that payment, I would use it over here, apply it to that, and attack that. And then when that's gone, if that's the next one, then this is the next one we attack. And so on and so forth. So the whole debt roll down method you might have seen before, I use the same thing, but I don't use lowest balance and I don't use highest interest. I use cash flow index. And what's interesting is that some people will say, well, I question those numbers. You know, like they want to put on their little nerdy spectacles and like, all right, is this really working? And they went and they go and make a whole spreadsheet out of it and they say, oh, okay, so really I only lost maybe 1 month. You know, 1 month's worth of interest that I actually lost over that period of time, over the next 5 years or 7 years that it takes me to pay these things off. What's really neat is they come back and they say, well, that only saved me that only is 1 month's worth of interest worse, but the peace of mind and freedom that I have in the meantime in case any hiccup happens that's priceless. And that's what happens, is that you can't live your life out of a calculator. You see all these people that try to tell you, they're like, man, like if I could just, you know, put this all in, it works perfectly. I have a whole spreadsheet mapped out that it's going to work exactly like this because my life is perfectly mapped out for the rest of my life, which we all know is just bogus, right? It just doesn't work that way. We cannot put our life into a calculator. So all we can do is how we create the best odds of success no matter what thing happens in our life. And that's why I keep coming back to cash flow. What can we do to free up the most cash with the least amount of dollars? And by the way, look at it from this standpoint. If I paid off that car loan, that $10,000, right? If I paid that off to free up $500 a month, think about the rate of return I would have to get on an investment that maybe I was putting into a retirement plan. If I said, well, wait, if I put money into a retirement plan hoping and praying for 5 or 6% a year, but instead I can put that same money over here, and that $500 a month, what that does, that frees up $6,000 a year. That's a 60% rate of return on my cash that no financial advisor can ever guarantee you. Even over here, 2,000, that's 2,400. From 10,000, that's 24% a year. I can assure you no financial advisor will even touch that interest rate, not only from a standpoint of being able to attain it, because they can't, but even from a standpoint of just being able to promise it. There's no way. This is guaranteed. All the other stuff they tell you to do with like your retirement accounts and everything is all speculation. And so that's where I'm like, no, let's pay these off one by one. Now, it's crazy. I'll see people with an index of 10 sometimes, or 5, or things like that. It's like, man, stop paying all these extra on these other things that are like 50, 60, 70, 80 or higher. Put it right there. Get this thing paid off. And when we get in this nice little organization, I try to get it to the point where it reorganizes so it's on a nice spreadsheet, says exactly in order which one to pay off first and how to do it. It's awesome. And by the way, there are times where you do not want to pay extra payments to a loan. For example, I would not pay extra payments to a car loan. I would only want to pay it off in one lump check. Because if we pay extra payments to a car loan, say you put on top of that 500, you put another 500 on top of it, the problem is that even though you're paying $1,000 a month to it, you can't go back into the bank and say, oof, I just had a real bad month. Can I get that extra payment back? They won't ever let you do that, right? They'll say, nope, you got to keep making that payment. And if you can't make it, you just messed up your credit. And so for some of these things like mortgages and car loans, some of these type of accounts, I usually don't recommend putting extra payments on it. I'd rather have you build it outside over here in a savings, and then when you got enough money to pay it off, you get it off and it's gone, just like that. Cool stuff? So this one right here, this one method, I think I mentioned to you, Teresa, or sorry, yeah, that's right, Teresa. I was going to call you Terry at first, so I got a little thrown off. But like I mentioned to you, I mean, this is why my average clients freed up about, on average, $34,000 a year. And a lot of it can happen here. Some of it's taxes, some of it's tracking, but a lot of it happens right here because we just find ways to be more productive with the money, not have to get crazy. In fact, speaking of crazy, I had a client from Manhattan that was a chiropractor out there. Great guy, but very emotionally just drained. I mean, the guy was just at his limit. He had some things happen with his real estate that went bad. His practice wasn't cash flowing as well as it should have been, and so he was at the point where if he kept going the route he was going, he would have to file for bankruptcy. And so he kind of came to us out of desperation, saying, "Well, what can we do?" And we got to the point where we said, "Well, if we can just move this around." I even had like a situation where I took a credit card to pay off things like a car loan, because hey, if I had an index of 50. If I knew that $10,000 would only be $200 a month, well, who could say I couldn't take a credit card, pay off that car loan, and now my new payment will be $400, but I'll still save the $500. So I basically freed up $300 for free with no cash out of pocket. So we did all these things of kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul to get this cash flow to a situation where he wasn't charging up and maxing out credit cards and going to the point of bankruptcy. And by the time we're said and done, for him in his situation, it was like only $700 a month that we were able to find. And I think a little bit more. It was almost $10,000 total for that year if we include like some of the tax benefits and so forth. And he kind of got to a point where he was just frustrated. He said, "Chris, you didn't do anything for me. Like you really just didn't do anything because all you did was just move money around." And I said, "Exactly. That's the beauty of it is that I did move money around because unless you can just," and I said this literally, this is not a joke. I said, "Unless you can somehow just pull money out of your rear end somehow." I mean, you can't just make it come out of thin air. You got to get money from somewhere. If you're not making your business, this is what I got to work with. And hey, we found $700 a month just on how we moved credit cards and loans around, balance transfers, all kinds of stuff to get them in a better place. And finally, just said, "Fine." That's the thing is that it's hard when you're in that much stress and scarcity. It's way easier to address it faster than later. And sometimes I just get people that say, "Okay, now I'm almost bankrupt, now what?" It's like, sorry, that's a little tough. I might be able to help you, but we might have to get really, really creative in those cases. It's a lot easier to get creative when you don't have those situations and when you're not dying financially. So anyways, that's what I do there is, which one's the lowest index? Focus everything towards that, and then when that's paid off, focus to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Just like that, very systematic. So, those are really, I'd say, like the top ways to free up cash. Everybody has some individual circumstances, but I mean that's the biggest thing is find ways to free up cash. And it ultimately is after you free up this cash, because the question I always get is, well, now what do I do with it? This question just says it depends on who you are as a steward. What's the best investment for you? Not for some salesman in a suit that's trying to have you put in some mutual funds, but what's the best investment for you? Where can you put that money to get the best effect? Is it into those loans? Is it into your business or into your savings or into your investments that you might have? Whatever that is, that's the whole point. And so the whole point is how we get you to be the best steward possible, free up the most cash to buy you more options. And the more options you have in your life, the more freedom you have because you're not just stuck in a rut. You're not stuck with just one route. You can say, you know what, I can take this way, or this way, and I can choose which path I take because my cash flow is under control. And that's the beauty of what we do. Yeah, question?
We've got a motorcycle loan that has a pretty low index rate.
Yeah.
However, they put the little clause in there that you can't really do the prepayment thing unless you pay what the full life of it would be. Would that be better to just?
It's like a lease option? Is that what it is?
No. It's a loan.
Okay.
But they won't let you prepay it. They won't.
Mm.
You have to pay the full amount that would accrue.
With all the interest and everything, right? Okay.
So that be better to get rid of?
Yeah. So
still, even though.
It is, well, here's what it depends. What I would do in that case. So the question was, for those that couldn't hear, is that they have, like if you have a motorcycle with a loan on it, and if you pay it off early, they have a prepayment, I don't think they have a penalty, just a prepayment clause, it sounds like, right?
Right.
But let's say if you do pay it off, you have to pay all the interest you would have paid over the life of that loan. Here's what I would do in that situation. Find out what that total balance would be. So say, for example, and I don't know what you owe, but just making numbers, say the balance is $6,000, but if you paid it off early, it would actually be $8,000 instead. Then what I would do is I would take instead that number, the 8,000, divide that into your payment, whatever that is. And then if that still gives you a lower index, then there you go. So it just depends. Kind of hard because, I mean, sometimes there might be other situations you might say, you know what, instead of paying that off, maybe we want to do it over here instead, because sometimes you want to play more offense than just defense. So it just depends. But yeah, I would, if you're trying to calculate the real cash flow index, I would take that amount with all the fees and interest and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do like you said, and just put it away in the bank, and then when you have the full amount, then
Just pay it off.
drop it
Right,
in one.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you would have to build up the bank anyways, right? So if you have the cash now, then it might be worthwhile because that could be the best return on investment for your cash and savings. But if not, and again, and here's another clause for me, or I don't know if clause is the right word, but strategy-wise is that when I have like my savings over here, I don't want to take everything out of savings to pay off a loan. I want still a lot of money in savings. At least if you're in a position where cash flow is really tight, I would suggest that don't take out all your savings, but maybe still leave a month or two's worth of expenses in here to then pay off with the remainder, pay off that loan, especially if things are tight. So if your things aren't tight, you might just say, well, great, wait till the 6 months of savings, then anything on top of that, then you go to pay off your loans. It just depends. But yeah, definitely, it's once you get the money built up in savings, and I would say above and beyond what you have in savings, then go and pay that off. So, good question. That's a great one. So, other questions? Sorry, I know we can't give you questions on here, but hey, that's what happens. We love you anyways. Any other points of clarification that I can give you? No? Awesome. So like I said, I mean, there's a lot of points. I think I skipped a few possibly, but like I said, there's a free ebook online you can just get, and there's lots of those points in there as well. So that's just at moneyripples.com. But in any case, Mike, if you got nothing else out of this conversation, just remember that cash flow creates freedom. And finding the ways that be the most creative possible to be able to create that, that's the key. So thanks for your time. And again, I'd like to thank Teresa and Kimber Academy as well for having me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate you coming. This was a great class, and Chris mentioned a few times how on Saturday he was going to be teaching another class. Now that's a week from Saturday. On October 26th is the day that we have our all-day seminar. We're calling it Have a Great Day, because we have a lot of guest speakers coming in to teach us how to have a great day. And let me just go over that with you so that you know what to expect. We are going to, for our first hour and a half, we're going to be talking about spiritual health. The class is called The Command That Embraces All Others, taught by LeGrand Lane. He is the Tempview seminary principal here, does some great classes. And then we will have one on physical health called To Run and Not Be Weary by Dr. Jerry Duggar. He is a chiropractor. We'll have a class on emotional and mental health called Pathological Positivity by Dr. Paul Jenkins, and we had a class from him just last week. It was wonderful. And then our Healthy Relationships class will be Marital Ecstasy with Eric and Mindy Heath. They give a great class. And then our evening will finish up with Financial Freedom, Parable of the Talents Applied by Chris Miles. So that's a week from Saturday, October 26th, here at the Glenn J. Kimber Academy in Lehigh, and it will be also televised online. So get on, register. Tickets are $35 for the whole day long. So we'll hope to see you there. And thanks for being here tonight, and thanks again, Chris.